Do you own a Novation Circuit Tracks, or are you planning on purchasing one? Have you ever felt that it's a little disappointing that the Circuit Tracks only comes with two synth engines? In this video, I'm going to show you how to take the two synth tracks and turn them into 4 or more synth parts for more power in producing music on Circuit Tracks.
More power!
I'll also have a little bonus towards the end, so stick around. On the Circuit Tracks, there are two different polyphonic sequencer tracks, each one attached to a polyphonic synthesizer. Now, you only get one synthesizer tone per synthesizer, or per synthesizer track, but on each one, they can produce up to 6 notes per step. However, this may not be as compositionally limiting as it may appear at first. Think of a jazz pianist who can play a melody in their right hand while comping chords and an accompaniment in their left hand. Or think about how J.S. Bach could write a fugue with a melody in the right hand, a melody in the left hand, and a third melody that would pass between the two of them. These are examples of one instrument basically filling 2 or more different roles at the same time. Our tracks are filled with various parts playing multiple roles. We have basses and pads and leads and arpeggios and counter melodies and etc. So our strategy is going to be based on taking the 6 notes that are available per individual synth and dividing those notes up into different roles. So one of the things we need to do when we're doing this is to choose our sounds. And depending on the kind of sound you choose, you'll get various roles that it can fill. For example, if I choose a bass here, which I did on Synth 1, and here's a little preset, I believe. Where is it? Yep, that's right here. It's this one in the middle. So this is the preset that I chose for Synth 1. And this is what it sounds like. So that's got a nice short sound. It works well for a bass part, especially if that bass part's going to be an energetic moving bass part. It'll also work well for an active lead or an arpeggio. Now over on Synth 2, I chose what was going to be my pad. Now this pad, unlike a lot of pads which might have like a slow attack, this one has a little bit of a harder attack. And so that's going to allow it to work also as a melody or an arpeggio as well. One of the things you can do is play with the various synthesis parameters to adapt them to the kind of sound or role you want them to fill. But keep in mind that when you're having one sound fill more than one role, it has to fit well into both roles. As a general rule of thumb, if your part is going to be more active, you're going to want to have it have a faster attack and a faster decay on either the filter envelope and or the amplifier envelope. Once you've chosen your sounds, you can begin composing your main ideas. In composition, conservation of material is actually a bonus or a plus, so we don't have to compose a lot of different ideas. Maybe 1 or 2 bass lines, 1 or 2 arpeggios, 1 or 2 different harmonic progressions. You don't have to compose a lot, but then the interest comes in how we introduce these things and how they unfurl and to what we assign them. So what kind of sound we assign them to would be considered orchestration. And how it unfolds is the actual arranging or the structure of the song. So for example, here in Live, I've imported a lot of my sequences from the Circuit Tracks that I had used. So I composed these on the Circuit Tracks, but then I loaded them into Live so you can kind of see what's going on, since the tracks can't always show you what is going on. So right here we have my bass line, and my bass line is just a set of straight eighth notes. This is the bass line that opens up the piece. I'll show you what it sounds like. And that's it. And that's how the piece opens up. This is playing from live. I'll play it from the circuit tracks itself here. Hold on, just stop this. There we go. And the way it sounds on the circuit tracks, just added in the percussion. So now the next thing I do is I introduce a pad. So this happens in the second scene here. And that's the pad. So these are the two parts combined. Let's see if I can. So right now, each synth is only doing one part. So there's the bass line for the bass, synth 1, and there's the pad for the pad assignment in synth 2. And at this point, too, I've also introduced the snare and the kick in the arrangement. I'll show you what that sounds like over here. So we go to the second scene. And that's what it sounds like coming from the circuit tracks. So in the next scene, I end up introducing a melody, or actually an arpeggiated part in synth 1. So I have both the bass line and the arpeggiated part. And I'll show you what that looks like and sounds like. So we'll go down here to the second scene, and we'll just look at the bass. And now you can see that this is synth 1. Now you can see that I have both a bass line and this arpeggiated part that's on one synth. It's still the same sound. Everything's the same sound. But because of the difference in registers being very low down here and being more in the upper mid-range up here, they're going to sound a little distinct. Not to mention they're playing different roles. They're moving in different directions. The bass line is static, but the arpeggio is moving up and down. So this is what we call oblique motion. And I'll show you what that sounds like. So you can see it almost sounds like a Stranger Things kind of a thing. But when we add in the kick and the sidechain compression, it's going to sound different. So I'll show you what it sounds like here on the circuit tracks. And I'll take out synth 2. So we'll just hear the drums and the arpeggiation. There it is with just the kick. Now I'll take the kick out. And all of a sudden the full arpeggio is revealed. So that's another trick you can use to add interest to your arrangement, bringing some kind of a sidechain instrument in and out. So the next thing I did on scene 4 is to change the bass line. So I went to a second bass line. This one's a little more active, kind of coming down a little scale. And this is what it sounds like. Okay, and now going back to the device, I'll show you what it looks like contextualized on there. So, here's the next scene. We'll take out all the percussion, just the kick and the bass. Whoops. Now throw in the other elements. So what we did was we took out that arpeggio. It was only in there for a little bit and then it was out again. And this time I brought in a new bass line and paired that with the original pad sequence. So on scene 4, or scene 5, this is where we add a new pad. So now we have a new bass idea, we have a new pad idea. And the new pad idea sounds like this. Whoops. Oops. Get rid of that and bring in the pad. Sounds a little bit different. It's in a higher register. And people may or may not associate it with the original synth voice. Again, registers, or the octaves that you're using, can make a big difference in how people perceive it. And I'll show you what this sounds like over on the circuit tracks. Okay, so now looking at scene 6, we add another part in the bass line. We have a little bit of an arpeggio going on here, and I'll show you what this sounds like. We're going to mute pad 2, and we'll just show you the bass line with the arpeggio. And then I'll add back in the pad. We'll hear 2 of them together. And this is what they sound like combined. And I'll show you on the circuit tracks. Okay, so now on scene 7, we add another part on top of the pad. So we have an arpeggio above the bass, and we have an arpeggio above the pad. So this will be scene 7. And let's solo the pad. You can see that secondary part down here beneath the pad track we had before. So again, it's a different register. And combine that with the bass. And I'll show you what that sounds like on the circuit tracks. Finally, in the last scene here, it was scene 8, I added another melody in the second synth part. So we'll take a look at it over in live here. You can see it right here. With the bass. And you can see that there's a bit of an overlap in register here between the 2 different synths, but these are different synth voices, so they do sound a little more distinct. So at this point, we do have 4 different parts going on in the circuit tracks. And I'll show you what that scene sounds like on the unit itself. And finally, we come to the last scene here, scene 9. And it's kind of just a reversion back to the beginning where I go back to the original bass line and the original pad idea. I don't need a third idea here in general, like a third section of the song. I can just go back to the first section of the song. And again, it's not just playing these things, but it's bringing the percussion in and out. It's playing with the filters and various synthesis parameters that makes it interesting, adds interest to the structure of the piece. So I'll show you scene 8. Pretty much like scene 2. It's just the same beginning, back to the beginning. And then kind of like fade parts out. In fact, if I remember right, I was using both the filter and, so I'll bring this up on the circuit tracks. So on this one, and I just did a fade and a filter sweep, like kind of going down. And that's how I ended the piece. Now, I use this just to use the circuit tracks only. So you only use this trick within the circuit tracks itself. Of course, there's the MIDI 1 and MIDI 2 tracks on it. So if you had it hooked up to an external synth, like the SH4D or some other external synthesizer that's polyphonic, right? Let's say like the, what is that? The Korg Minilog, for example. You can then use the same trick on that external polyphonic synthesizer. Likewise, if you have other polyphonic sequencers, you can use that same trick on other synthesizers using a different sequencer. Say, well, obviously, an external DAW would be one of the prime examples, but anything else that can do a polyphonic sequence. And it's just a way of making the most of a minimal amount of materials. Another thing you can do is when you export the stuff out of the circuit tracks, say into your DAW like Ableton Live, you can then go in and separate the tracks. If I were to go over here and take this, for example, I could maybe create a duplicate of the track. So we're going to duplicate the track and go into this section here and just erase the bottom parts. And now I have just the arpeggiated part that comes above it. And that allows me to direct that to another soft synth. So this is an example of how you can use the circuit tracks as a scratch pad and then bring it out into a larger project inside your DAW. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you learned something about creating 2 or more tracks on a single sequencer lane for something like the Circuit Tracks by Novation or any other polyphonic sequencer. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. And until next time, happy sequencing.